All right, so this is my first video. Well, other than the ones of me playing on my guitar. So I had an idea, and in this first video, I want to lay out what's what this series of videos is going to be about, because this is going to be a series. Spoiler alert. Um, so in coming to grips recently as an adult with my ADHD. Um, and we'll in later videos we'll talk more about what I mean by coming to grips with it. I apologize that the camera is shaking. I just shook my head and my whole laptop is moving. Um, anyways, so as you can see, I'm kind of scatterbrained. Those of you that know me know that about me. I can be very intense. I can be very verbose, but I can also be kind of flighty and easily distracted. Um, these are definitely uh, outward expressions of my ADHD. So, anyways, what I was trying to get at is this series of videos is going to be video by video steps through my journey as a person with ADHD. Um, like we're gonna go back to uh, when I was a kid. We're gonna go back to when I was in high school. Um, we're gonna go through how I came from being diagnosed with ADHD, how I dealt with my ADHD as a child, how my ADHD and my medication affected me as a child. I'm going to uh, talk about how I went through a period where I believed and promoted the idea that ADHD was not real, um, or at least not real in the way that it is or was perceived, or the way that I was treated based on my ADHD. I very strongly, for many years, fought back against the idea that there was something wrong with me and that it had a name called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Um, I felt for a long time that that diagnosis held me back in a lot of ways. And over the course of this series, we are going to talk about those things. Um, so for this first video, now that I've explained everything of what's going on, sorry about that. I thought I saw something on the screen. Um, anyways, like I said, kind of spacey, kind of everywhere at once. Trying to, you can't see it, but inside here, I am diligently trying to force the 35 or more different trains of thought I have going on about this series into a cohesive single train that goes in a proper order that makes sense and that will achieve my goal. And my goal with these videos is not only the catharsis of being able to talk about this, but also my goal is for this to be able to help someone else, um, to be able to express these things out loud, these feelings, these thoughts, these experiences in a way that someone else out there that is roughly my same age came into the ADHD diagnosis around the same time that I did, and experienced the same lack of understanding by the world at large of ADHD that I did. So, with that, let's start at the beginning. I mean, not the I was born beginning, but not long after that. When I was a small child, when I was a toddler, um, I was characterized a lot by being very active, being everywhere, and into everything, which, having kids now that are similar, I can understand the distress of my parents in not knowing how to handle that, needing a method of control, but that comes in a little bit. So, anywho, I was everywhere. There is a story told by my aunt, which in these videos I am going to name names. I'm going to talk about real people and real situations, and none of these real people or situations am I necessarily holding a grudge against or intentionally disparaging them. I do not wish to. All I am trying to do is lay this out as openly and honestly as I can. And I do apologize right now to anyone that I mention in these videos that perhaps you are depicted in a bad light. I apologize for that. I do not hold any hard feelings against you, and I do completely understand that you are human, just like I am, and we all make decisions with the information we have. None of us can operate off of information we don't have. None of us can know the exact specific consequences of our actions unless it is in hindsight. So if any of you get mentioned in this and you are offended, please, I cannot stress this enough, please reach out to me and let me talk to you specifically regarding it, because again, I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm not out here with a vendetta against anyone. I am simply laying it bare. So anywho, there is a story that I have been told many times now. I'm not sure where specifically, whose house I was in, but my Aunt Trisha, my dad's youngest sibling, was watching me. She was babysitting me that day, and the story goes where the two of us, my sister might have been there somewhere as well. I don't know. My sister is slightly older than I am. I don't think she was in school yet at this time, but she could have been. I was 3 years old, and my aunt and I were in the kitchen of whatever house we were in, and excuse me, that's fantastic on a video. Sorry about that. We were in this kitchen, and my aunt had to leave the room for a moment. Now, at this point, I was walking a fully mobile toddler, as would be expected at 3 years old. I believe I was talking. I don't know for sure because, honestly, I don't remember being 3 years old, except for one exception, and that's a large surgery I had when I was 3 years old, which I will explain after I finally get through this story. So many different paths I run off on. Anyways, so my aunt had to leave the room for a moment, and when she returned, I was sitting on top of the refrigerator. We don't know how I got on top of the refrigerator. There is no, visual evidence of anyone being there to witness me climbing up onto the refrigerator, but the story goes my aunt left the room for less than 5 minutes, and she comes back, and I am sitting on top of the refrigerator. And I tell this story to express just how active I was, how into everything I was, even as a toddler. So, and not just into everything, but finding ways around what would be would appear to be limitations. Um, you wouldn't think most 3-year-olds could figure out how to climb up a refrigerator. Um, Apparently, I did. Uh, yeah, and other things um, that happened or that occurred when I was in that age range. This is all prior to an ADHD diagnosis, mind you. Um, around 3 years old as well, 3 to 4 years old. My dad has informed me um, that there was a time that I somehow got a hold of the neighbor's lawnmower and proceeded to take it apart. I wanted to know how it worked. I wanted to see all the individual pieces and parts that made it work. And so I did. I got a hold of some tools and I got a hold of a lawnmower and I took that thing apart. Mind you, I couldn't put it back together because I was 3 or 4 years old, but I was curious and active and into everything. I wanted to know how. I wanted to know why. Um, the need to know why is a theme of my life. I like to know why things are. I like to know how things are. It gives me a greater understanding of the world at large. I feel, and give me a peace of mind. Um, anyways, fast forward just a hair to my kindergarten year. Um, some things that stick out to me from kindergarten is I was in PM kindergarten. We didn't have back in, let's see, what was that, 1989, 1988. We didn't have full day kindergarten. I did start kindergarten late because I was born in August and I missed the window. I was not yet 5 the school year that I could have started in because I turned 5 like immediately prior to the school year starting, and at that time they weren't very big on you know allowing that to slip through, allowing kids that are they are 5 but they turned 5 very recently. They weren't big on letting that happen. They were very intent on the development that happens um, once you turn 5 mentally, what happens there. And so I started late. I started a year behind other kids that were born in 1983, like I was. Yes, I'm 36 years old. It's out there now. Um, anyways, um, I we had PM kindergarten. I went to school in the afternoons. Um, I remember thinking my teacher was awesome. I remember thinking kindergarten was just the best thing ever. I remember having a huge crush on this girl at my school, to the point where one day after school she rode on my bus, um, and this is just how single-minded I can be sometimes. She rode on my bus, and because I liked her, I noticed that where I noticed around where the bus stopped, um, for her to get off, but I didn't know what house she went into. Keep in mind, I'm 5 or 6 years old at this time. Um, 6 years old, I was 6, and so being the person that I was, one day after school, I decided to ride my bicycle and go and try and find her house. Like I rode down like 2 streets away from my house and around the general area that I had the idea that she lived, and I rode up and down that street for probably a little while, hoping to see her and find out where she lived because I wanted to know more about her. I wanted to get to know her better. I wanted to be her friend because at 6 years old, that's what I was thinking of was I wanted to be friends with this girl. I apologize for the notification sounds you guys are getting. Uh, so yeah, that's a memory of mine, um, and this is before. Again, this is before being diagnosed with ADHD. I didn't get diagnosed until I was in first grade. Um, some other things that I recall. I recall uh, the day that my dad tried to teach me how to color inside the lines because that was a thing. That was a big thing. You had to know how to color inside the lines, um, and I wasn't very good at it at first. So um, I remember this so distinctly because my dad and I were sitting there at the kitchen table, um, and my dad's trying to teach me, and I'm coloring in this Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer coloring book. Yes, I remember it that specifically because what happened next is I puked all over the coloring book and did not go to school that day. Um, yeah, that is definitely a way to remember learning how to color inside the lines. Is if you get sick in the middle of it, and yeah, hurl all over the coloring book. Not the best memory, but it is a very vivid one for me. I yeah, it's just a very vivid memory for me. Um, I mentioned a little bit ago a a surgery that I had at 3 years old. That is the pretty much only thing I remember from being 3 years old, um, and it's memorable because it was traumatic, um, and not traumatic in that I am permanently scarred. Well, I am physically, uh, but not like mentally scarred from it. It's just it is a vivid, visceral thing that happened, um, and yeah, I when I was born, I had a birthmark like you know most people. But the strange thing about my birthmark, it was located on the right side of my chest, um, right next to my right nipple. I apologize if any of these words offend anybody, but again, I'm just being open and honest and specific. So my birthmark was next to my right nipple, or in and around my right nipple, and as a newborn, it wasn't very big. Not my nipple, the birthmark. Uh, Birthmark was maybe the size of a nickel, maybe a quarter. Um, but the problem came, the potential issue came when between birth and 3 years old, this birthmark, uh, I would say, quadrupled in size. By the time I was 3 years old, it was about 3 inches tall, uh, this way, and then about 6 inches this way, this way. Okay, so 6 inches across, three inches in height. Basically covered my entire right pec, uh, which as a 3-year-old, that's a very small part of the body, but still, it was big. Um, so my parents took me to a doctor, and the doctor was very concerned. Um, Sorry, my foot was falling asleep. All right. So the doctor was very concerned with the continued growth of my birthmark. He, in fact, felt that it was behaving like a mole, and could be potentially melanoma. Um, also called skin cancer. So the decision was quickly made to cut it off. They went in and they cut my birthmark and my nipple right off. I have a scar on the right side of my chest now that is about 6.5 inches wide and about 3/4 of an inch thick. So wide and I can't find the camera. There you go. Wide and thick. Um, Instead of having a nipple. So yeah, there's that. You now know that about me. Isn't that exciting? Um, Anyways, but I say the memory is vivid because I remember, and there's only one other time in my early childhood that I remember such a thing as what I'm about to describe to you. Sorry, this video thing will get better, I promise. I do have a webcam that's separate from my computer, but I didn't want to go find it right now. I'm just gonna do this the standard on my laptop way. So, anyways, I vividly remember this green goop, like it was a pale, slimy color, and it was kind of slimy in consistency that they had on the hospital bed um, that I laid down on. And what this was, as far as I know, was a uh, topical method of um, putting me under, of knocking me out, making me sleep, those things. It wasn't like the other things they use that I can't think of words right now. Like when I had my carpal tunnel surgery, they put me under for that, but they didn't use green goop. They gave me a shot. Um, so, but I distinctly remember how that goop felt on my back. Um, it sticks out pretty poignantly in my memory. Um, that experience, that feeling. Uh, so here I am, 3 years old, getting the right side of my chest cut off. I remember the stitches and how they felt afterwards. Yeah, that's probably my earliest memory. How that's relevant to anything, I don't know. But there you are, following along on my rabbit trail. So, anywho, I'm going to try to wrap this up. My wife just messaged me that she's on lunch and I would like to call and talk to her. So let me fast forward just a hair to first grade. First grade, I was still very, very active. I was starting to have issues in the classroom with staying on task, staying focused, staying quiet. I remember, like, actually remember exactly some of the noises and weird things that I did in first grade that got me in trouble. Um, Now, this is where there is a little bit of frustration and I would even say bitterness towards my first grade teacher, um, because honestly, she had no clue. She had no idea what to do. Neither did the school at large. Um, they my first grade teacher had been a teacher for a while, but she had just my first grade year. She was transferring from being a fifth grade teacher to a first grade teacher, and I feel that didn't really set her up for success with a kid like me, a kid that needed to be engaged and needed to be um, pulled into the classroom, whereas what she did was push me out of the classroom. Um, I learned a lot about worms that school year because I would get sent to the principal's office And the answer of this school at the time for a kid like me who was making noises in class and couldn't sit still was, let's sit him in the principal's office and let him read I don't remember if it was a highlights or a National Geographic or something, um, but basically sit there and read magazines and be bored out of his mind even more for hours at a time, um, until they, would decide to send me back to class, because somehow that helped. I don't know how it was supposed to help, but it certainly did not. All it did was make me more bored. Um, but again, I learned about worms, so that was cool. Uh, the other thing that can be held as uh, a bad thing, and I have to be able to say that this next thing I'm going to describe to you that this teacher did was a very bad thing, very damaging to me as a person, very damaging to my emotional well-being, very very much just all around damaging. Um, One day in class, I was being particularly inattentive and noisy, and because of this, my teacher decided, hey, let's learn about democracy today. And other members of the class, all you 6 and 7 year olds, you are going to vote as to whether or not Jon-ee gets to go to recess. And they, of course, being led by the teacher, um, they voted for me not to get to go to recess. And I know recess seems trivial, but for a 7 year old boy who is just trying to be himself, um, just trying to get through this school thing, and doesn't honestly understand why he keeps making noise, why he is so bored, why he can't focus, to have the entire class vote on you and choose as a majority that you don't get to go be with everybody else. You don't get to go and play. Hurt. It still hurts. I'm struggling with emotion right now, thinking about it, because it sucked. Um, and I still harbor some ill will towards that teacher. I don't know her name. I couldn't tell you what she looked like or pick her out of a crowd if I had to. But nameless, faceless first grade teacher at Southwood Elementary in 1989 did not do me any favors. My mother, God rest her soul, my mother wanted that lady fired when she found out about it. I can only imagine the anger that both of my parents felt regarding that, because that is a very damaging thing. It is a very inappropriate thing for a teacher to do to a 7-year-old. Granted, she didn't lay hands on me, she didn't, physically harm me, but she damaged me psychologically for the rest of my life. I still deal with feelings that others are judging me, or are deciding behind my back, or talking behind my back about what they really think about me. Um, and we'll get into other situations in later videos that reinforced that feeling of people not being 100% with me, of what caused me for many years to take a very hard line with the truth, a very hard line of, at one point in high school, I very repetitively would tell people, the trying to wrap my head up here. I would say something that would hurt the other person's feelings, and the thing I said would be true, but and the other person would tell me that that hurt them, and I got into a habit, a standard of responding with, well, I guess sometimes the truth hurts. No skin off my nose. And if I tell you the truth and it hurts you, that's on you. I, of course, in the intervening years since I got out of high school, I've changed that. I'm still big on the truth, but not to the point of using it to hurt people. So, anyways, during this course of time, I'm gonna try to wrap this up again. I say again, I'm gonna try to wrap this up. I need to call my wife. During this course of time, my dad, being a counselor for at-risk teens at Crittenton, which is a place for runaway kids, at-risk teens, or at least it was, here in the Kansas City area. Kind of like, you might have heard of Two Rivers. Two Rivers is kind of the same, or similar. My dad was a chaplain and a counselor there. He had, lots of psychology experience and learning, and he picked up on the signs. He picked up on, what could be going on with me, what could be the answer, because there was this new thing called ADD, attention deficit disorder, or ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the hyperactivity being the big key on me. But because of his somewhat knowledge, he went around, had me see a couple of psychiatrists or psychologists. I don't know, I was 7. But I talked to a couple doctors, head doctors, and took some tests, and took an IQ test, scored really high, and through this process, I was diagnosed with ADHD. There was a name for what was going on with Jon-ee Hopkins. Why Jon-ee Hopkins could not sit still. Why Jon-ee Hopkins could focus when it was something that engaged him, but would make noise and fidget and get out of his seat when we were doing a class lesson on something that I had absolutely no interest in, or in fact already knew and had no interest in learning it again. I did deal with that, where I have always had a really good grasp of English and literature and grammar. I have an internal tick about grammar, and when something is said incorrectly, it just sounds funny to me. I can't really explain it other than it just sounds off, and it just like niggles at the back of my brain. That's not right. This is how that should be. So there were times in my school days where I was bored because I already knew it. I already knew the information. I didn't need to be taught something I already knew. And I would find ways to entertain myself because of that. So anyways, get diagnosed with ADHD, and at the time, the understanding was so limited that the answer was Ritalin, or the medical name is methylphenidate. It is pharmaceutical speed. And honestly, it is actually a very good medication when used correctly. It's a very good medication for people with ADHD, with the neurodevelopmental disorder ADHD. It is very good at bringing us in. By taking us up, it actually levels us out. Okay, because the ADHD brain is actually in certain segments of brainwave activity. The ADHD brain is way up here, whereas other segments of the brain are down here at or about normal, whereas the ones that are increased are at genius or higher. Um, yeah. So what the Ritalin, the methylphenidate, the Adderall, which is amphetamine salts, which is what I'm on now. Uh, what it does, the way I understand it, is it takes those brain waves that are down here and it enhances them and brings them closer to the ones that are up here, so that the cliff between the two is not so great. So that when you're being engaged on one of the lower brainwave levels, you can focus close to what you would if you were being engaged in one of the upper levels. For me, English is an upper level. For me, math is a lower level. I do not like math. I've never done well with doing math. I can do math. I am good at math when I put my mind to it, but I hate math. I have always hated math because it's down here. It's something that just does not pique my interest unless it's very specific math. I like geometry. I like real numbers. I don't like algebra because I've never been a fan of x equals what it equals because Jim at the math book company said so. X is a made-up number. It's a made-up factor in the equation, and I prefer things that are real. I like, the diameter of a coffee mug that you are holding in your hand will always be that same diameter unless you break it. That's a real number, and I can operate with real numbers. Money is the same way. I can operate with money because it's real. Anyway, so there I am. I have been diagnosed. I have been prescribed medication, and here's where it starts to go downhill in a lot of ways, and I will get into that in the next video. So if you liked this video, I guess I'm supposed to say, hit the like button down here somewhere and subscribe and whatnot, and we will find out more next time.